The sun hung low over the cracked asphalt of Highway 17, casting long shadows across the dusty pull-off where a cluster of weathered crosses stood sentinel. Wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and exhaust from the idling motorcycles lined up like silent guardians. It was one of those roadside memorials that dotted the forgotten stretches of the American West, simple wooden markers, faded photos pinned with duct tape, and offerings of empty beer cans and wilting daisies. But today the air felt heavier, charged with unspoken grief as a small group gathered for the annual vigil. Families of the lost, locals with bowed heads, and a few out-of-towners who'd heard the call on some old radio station. In the midst of it all stood Vera Collins, 17 and sharp-edged, like the desert thorns around her. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, but stray wisps, framed eyes red from tears, she refused to let fall. She clutched a faded Polaroid of her father, the man she'd pieced together from half-remembered stories and a mother's bitter silence. To her, he was the ghost who vanished when she was 6, leaving behind nothing but questions and a hole that no amount of anger could fill. The service droned on, a pastor's voice cracking over the wind, reciting names of those who'd met their end on these roads, but Vera's gaze wandered restless, until it snagged on a man at the edge of the crowd. He was broad-shouldered, his leather vest scarred from years of sun and storm, the iron promise patch gleaming dully on his back. Ben Cinder Lawson, 56, and built like the trucks he used to haul freight, stood with his arms crossed, staring at the ground as if the earth might swallow his secrets. The convoy of bikes behind him rumbled softly, a low growl that spoke of miles traveled and oaths kept. Vera's eyes narrowed on the stitching beneath his club emblem, a name embroidered in worn red thread. Jack Collins, her father's name. Her breath caught, a sharp intake that cut through the pastor's words like a knife. "Why do you have my father's name?" Her voice sliced the air, not loud, but piercing, drawing every head in the circle. She stepped forward, the Polaroid trembling in her fist, her boots kicking up dust that danced in the fading light. The crowd parted instinctively, murmurs rippling like heat waves off the blacktop. Fear flickered in her eyes, not just confusion, but the raw terror of a truth she'd long buried under resentment. What if this stranger, this biker with grease-stained hands and a face etched by regret, held the key to the abandonment she'd hated him for? Ben's head snapped up, his weathered face draining of color. The world narrowed to her, those fierce green eyes, so like Jack's, and the weight of 20 years crashed down. He staggered back a step, his knee buckling against the bench at the memorial's edge. The wood creaked under him as he collapsed onto it, hands gripping the seat like it was the only thing keeping him from unraveling. A low sob escaped, muffled at first, then breaking free as tears carved tracks through the road dust on his cheeks. The other bikers shifted uneasily, their engines falling silent, but none moved to help. This was Ben's burden, carried alone until now. Vera froze, her indignation cracking under the sight of this giant of a man undone. You knew him?" she whispered, edging closer, the photo now a shield against the vulnerability blooming in her chest. Ben nodded, wiping his face with a calloused palm, the scent of leather and motor oil rising sharp in the still air. "More than knew him, kid. He saved my life." His voice was gravel, honed by cigarettes and long hauls, but it trembled with the ghosts it dragged up. The pastor paused, the service hanging suspended, as if the desert itself held its breath. It had been a night like no other, back when the world was rawer, the roads lawless under a canopy of stars. Ben, then just 36, fresh from the service with scars that itched under his skin, had been running a midnight transport through the Badlands. Not legal cargo, but the kind that kept desperate families fed in forgotten towns. Jack Collins, his partner on that run, was the steady one, quiet, with a laugh that cut through tension like sunlight through fog. They'd shared stories around campfires, promises forged in the flicker of flames, about daughters waiting at home, about building something better than the chaos they'd left behind. The ambush came without warning. Headlights pierced the darkness on a stretch of empty two-lane, engines roaring like predators closing in. Tires screeched, bullets pinged off metal, and the air filled with the acrid bite of gunpowder and fear. Ben's truck swerved, the world tilting into chaos. He remembered the impact, the shatter of glass, the jolt that threw him against the dash, but it was Jack who acted. "Get out! Go!" Jack's shout over the din, his hand shoving Ben toward the ditch as return fire lit the night. Jack took the hit meant for him, crumpling against the wheel with a gasp that echoed in Ben's nightmares. Blood bloomed dark on his shirt, but his eyes, fierce, unyielding, locked on Ben's. "Promise me," Jack rasped, the truck's engine hissing steam around them. "Carry my name, until she knows. Don't let 'em say I ran." His fingers dug into Ben's arm, the grip iron despite the fading light in his gaze. "Vera, tell her I fought. For her." Ben had sworn it then, dragging himself away as sirens wailed in the distance. Official reports called it a tragic accident, the kind that buried truths under red tape and indifference. Jack's body vanished into the system's maw. No ceremony, no closure, just whispers of desertion that poisoned Vera's childhood. Ben carried the name stitched into his vest, a silent vow through bar fights, lost brothers, and the iron promise creed, loyalty above all, promises etched in blood. Now, under that merciless sun, Ben looked up at Vera, the girl's face a mirror of the man he'd failed to save. "Your dad didn't leave you," he said, voice steadying as the words poured out. "He gave everything to get me clear. That name, it's his legacy. I wore it so it wouldn't die with him." Vera's knees weakened, and she sank beside him on the bench, the Polaroid slipping to the dirt. The crowd watched in hushed awe, the wind carrying away the first soft sounds of her tears. In that moment, amid the crosses and the growl of waiting bikes, a bridge formed, not of steel or stone but of truth long buried. The Iron Promise riders exchanged glances. This was their call now, to unearth the records, summon the witnesses, and rewrite the story corruption had stolen. One promise, kept against the odds, rippling out to heal what time had torn. But as the sun dipped lower, painting the horizon in fire, shadows lingered. Who had silenced Jack's heroism? And what price would they pay to drag it into the light? The road ahead stretched endless, demanding more than words, demanding justice, quiet and unyielding. The dust settled slowly around the bench, like the fading echo of a distant thunder. Vera sat there, her shoulder brushing Ben's, the warmth of his vest a stark contrast to the chill creeping into her bones as the sun bled into the horizon. The Polaroid lay forgotten in the dirt, Jack's smile staring up at the sky, frozen in a moment of joy she'd never known. Around them, the Iron Promise riders formed a loose circle, their shadows stretching long like fingers, reaching for the truth. Engines ticked as they cooled, the metallic scent mingling with the earthy tang of sagebrush. But no one spoke. The pastor cleared his throat, murmuring a benediction that felt too small for the weight of revelations hanging in the air. Ben drew a ragged breath, his eyes tracing the line of crosses that marked this sacred patch of nowhere, each one a story swallowed by the road, just like Jack's. "It wasn't just that night," he said finally, his voice low, pulling Vera back from the edge of her spiraling thoughts. "Your dad. He was the glue for us all. Iron Promise wasn't always this tight-knit. Back then we were a ragtag bunch. Vets like me, hauling loads to keep the wolves from our doors. Jack saw the fractures, the way greed was pulling us apart. He made us promise to stick, no matter what, loyalty over everything. Vera turned to him, her green eyes searching his face for lies, but finding only the raw etch of guilt. "Then why'd they say he ran?" "Mom, she told me he just left, took off with some cash and never looked back." The words tasted bitter, like the dust on her tongue, but she needed to hear it shattered piece by piece. Ben's jaw tightened, the lines around his mouth deepening like cracks in sun-baked clay. He glanced at the riders, men and women who'd ridden through hell with him, their faces weathered by the same storms. There was Riley Forge Harlan, the club's enforcer, his arms crossed over a chest broad as a barrel, tattoos of flames curling up his neck like warnings. Beside him, Lena Spark Torres, sharp-eyed and unyielding, the one who handled the ledgers and the lies that came with them. They nodded subtly, a silent vote of trust. "Because someone wanted it that way," Ben replied, his tone hardening. "The run that night, it was bigger than us. Corporate haulers, the kind with suits and badges, cutting corners on dangerous cargo, chemicals, unstable stuff that shouldn't have been on those roads." Jack and I stumbled into their mess, witnessed a spill they covered up. They ambushed us to silence it. A murmur rippled through the group, the wind picking up to whip at jackets and scarves. Vera's heart pounded, a drumbeat against her ribs, as fragments of old arguments with her mother resurfaced, whispers of debts and bad company. "So he died for what? Some spill?" Her voice cracked, indignation flaring like a match in the dusk. "Not just a spill," Ben said, leaning forward, elbows on knees, the bench groaning under his weight. "It poisoned a whole town downstream. Folks got sick, kids, families. Official word was accident, but Jack saw the manifests. He radioed it in before the shots started. That's why they buried him as a deserter. Easier to paint him a thief than a hero who could have brought down their operation." He paused, the memory pulling him under like a riptide. The chaos replayed in his mind, the acrid smoke from the wrecked truck, Jack's blood warm on his hands as he pressed a rag to the wound. "He made me promise to carry his name so you'd know someday. But I let the years slip. Iron promise. We tried digging once, years back. Hit walls, sealed files, witnesses who vanished. Corruption runs deep out here." Riley stepped forward, his boots crunching gravel, voice a rumble like idling thunder. "Not anymore. We've got reach now. Old contacts in the force, hackers who owe us. If Ben says it's time, we ride for answers." His eyes met Vera's, steady and reassuring, the kind of gaze that promised action without flash. Lena nodded, pulling a worn notebook from her saddlebag, the leather creaking softly. "We'll start with the transport logs. Fictional names, but patterns don't lie. And that sheriff's office in Dustville. Rumors say the old captain's retiring. Might talk if we lean right." Vera's mind reeled, the world tilting as if the highway itself had shifted. These strangers, grease under their nails, patches worn like badges of battles unseen, were offering what her blood family never could, a path to reclaim the father she'd lost twice. But doubt gnawed at her, sharp as the desert cold settling in. What if it's too late? What if they fight back? She glanced at the crosses, their silhouettes black against the fiery sky, each one a reminder of costs paid in silence. Ben placed a hand on her shoulder, gentle despite the calluses, the touch grounding her like an anchor in storm-tossed waves. "Then we fight smarter. Not with fists, but with truth. Your dad's promise wasn't just to me, it was to you, to make sure his stand mattered." The riders murmured agreement, a chorus of low voices blending with the first stars pricking the velvet dark. One by one, they revved their engines, the symphony of growls a vow in itself, united, unbreakable. As the group dispersed toward the bikes, Vera stood, brushing dirt from her jeans. The Polaroid now tucked safely in her pocket. The memorial felt different now, less a graveyard of ghosts and more a starting line. Ben rose beside her, offering a hand up to the passenger seat of his weathered Harley, its chrome catching the last glimmers of light. "Ride with us tonight to the chapter house. We've got records there, photos, letters. Jack left. It's a start." She hesitated, the engine's vibration humming through her soles, then nodded, climbing on. The bike roared to life beneath them, kicking up pebbles as they pulled onto the highway. Behind, the crosses watched them go, silent witnesses to a promise reignited. But in the rear view, Vera caught a glint, headlights, distant but closing, uninvited shadows on the endless blacktop. Who else knew of Jack's name? And what buried secrets would surface when the iron promise rolled in force? The night air rushed past, cool and alive with possibility, carrying them toward confrontation, not of bullets, but of buried honor demanding its due. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The highway blurred into a ribbon of black under the Harley's headlight, the engine's steady thrum vibrating through Vera's bones like a heartbeat she couldn't ignore. She clung to the back of Ben's vest, the leather warm against her palms. The embroidered Jack Collins brushing her fingertips, a tactile reminder that this wasn't a dream spun from grief. Wind whipped her ponytail, carrying the sharp tang of cooling asphalt and distant rain, while stars wheeled overhead in a vast, indifferent sky. Ben rode steady, his posture unyielding, but she felt the tension in his shoulders, the subtle lean as he glanced in the side mirror. Those headlights trailed them still, faint but persistent, like echoes refusing to fade. The chapter house loomed on the outskirts of Dustville, a squat bunker of weathered brick and chain-link fence, its iron promise banner flapping like a flag of defiance in the breeze. Floodlights buzzed to life as they approached, casting harsh pools of yellow that turned the gravel lot into a stage. A dozen bikes were already parked in neat rows, chrome gleaming like teeth in the night. Riders emerged from the shadows, silhouettes materializing with nods and low greetings, their boots crunching as they formed up. Riley and Lena were there, dismounting their machines with practiced ease, while others Vera didn't know yet watched from the porch, faces etched with curiosity and quiet resolve. Ben cut the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the night's chorus, crickets chirping in the scrub, the distant howl of a coyote, the creak of the gate swinging open. He helped Vera down, his hand lingering a second too long on her elbow, steadying her as her legs adjusted to solid ground. "This is home for us," he said softly, gesturing to the building. "Not fancy, but it's where promises get kept." The air smelled of aged wood and faint barbecue smoke from an earlier fire, a comforting undercurrent to the uncertainty knotting her gut. Inside, the main room unfolded like a cavern of memory. Walls lined with framed photos of rides and reunions, a massive oak table scarred from countless meetings, and shelves groaning under ledgers and faded maps. A single bulb swung overhead, swaying gently to cast dancing shadows that made the space feel alive, breathing. The group gathered around the table, pulling up mismatched chairs that scraped against the concrete floor. Lena spread out a worn folder, its edges frayed like old wounds, while Riley poured coffee from a dented pot, black and steaming, the aroma cutting through the musty air. Vera slid into a seat beside Ben, her eyes scanning the faces, grizzled vets with stories in their scars, a young mechanic named Jax, whose fingers drummed nervously on his knee, an older woman called Mira, who moved with the quiet grace of someone who'd bandaged too many falls. They weren't family by blood, but the way they leaned in, sharing glances heavy with shared history, spoke of bonds forged hotter than any forge. "Start from the beginning," Vera said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Everything. No holding back." Ben nodded, tracing a finger along the table's grain as if mapping the years. "After that night, I got away clean, hitched a ride to the next town, laid low, but the guilt, it rode me harder than any bike." Jack's last words looped in my head. Tell her I fought. I stitched his name on the vest that week in a roadside motel with a needle and thread from a gas station kit. Iron Promise was small then, just a handful of us swearing to watch each other's backs. We started digging quiet-like, pulled strings with a contact in the transport board, a guy named Ellis who'd owed Jack a favor from the war. Lena flipped open the folder, revealing yellowed copies of manifests, pages stamped with official seals that meant nothing now. These are from the run. See here? She pointed to a line, her nail tapping the paper. Cargo listed as industrial supplies, but the codes match hazardous waste. Jack flagged it on the radio log, time-stamped right before the ambush. We got this from a clerk who retired scared. Said the company pressured her to alter records. The words hung heavy, the room's air thickening as Vera leaned in, the ink blurring slightly under her gaze. It was real, tangible proof that her father's life had been traded for silence. Riley leaned back, his chair groaning, arms folded like barriers. But we hit the wall fast. The sheriff's office in Dustville classified it as a fugitive evasion gone wrong. Jack's file, sealed under some old privacy act, painted him as a deadbeat who'd bolted with payroll. Witnesses from the scene, truckers who saw the lights, either clammed up or moved away. One, a fella named Harlan Tate, vanished after getting a visit from suits in unmarked cars. We think the company buried it to avoid lawsuits from that poisoned town. Folks there still talk about the bad water that took their kids. Vera's throat tightened, a wave of nausea rising as she pictured it. A father, gunned down for speaking truth, his heroism scrubbed clean by greed. And Mom, she believed it all, raised me on scraps, said he was weak, that I was better off without him. The confessions slipped out, raw and unfiltered, drawing sympathetic murmurs from the circle. Mira reached across, squeezing her hand briefly, her touch calloused from years at a wrench. Ben's eyes met hers, shadowed but fierce. She was protecting you, in her way. Grief twists people, but Jack... He carried your photo in his wallet, kid. Talked about you constant, how you'd grow up fierce. Like him. That promise? It wasn't just mine. He made the whole crew swear it'd reach you someday. He pulled a small envelope from his vest pocket, sealed with wax long cracked. This is his. Left it with me before the run in case. Said to give it when the time was right. Vera's fingers trembled as she took it, the paper soft and yellowed, smelling faintly of tobacco and ink. She broke the seal carefully, unfolding a single sheet in Jack's scrawled hand. Vera, my firecracker, if you're reading this, know I never ran, fought for what's right, for you. Be strong, love, Dad. Tears blurred the words, hot and unbidden, splashing onto the page. The room fell quiet, the only sound the tick of a wall clock marking seconds like heartbeats. Outside, gravel crunched, tires on the lot, engines cutting off abruptly. The group tensed, hands drifting to pockets where knives or worse might hide. Ben rose slowly, peering through the grimy window. Those lights from the road, they're here. Shadows moved beyond the fence, two figures in dark coats approaching the gate, one flashing a badge that caught the floodlight's glare. Not friends, not foes yet, but intruders in a house built on secrets. Riley stood, his bulk filling the doorway. Company men, or worse? Lena snapped the folder shut, tucking it away as the knock echoed. Sharp, insistent. Vera clutched the letter to her chest, the weight of Jack's words anchoring her amid the rising storm. The iron promise closed ranks, a wall of leather and loyalty, ready to guard the truth they'd just unearthed. But as the door creaked open, revealing a stern-faced investigator with eyes like chipped flint, Vera wondered, how deep did the corruption run, and what would it cost to pull her father's honor from its grave? The night pressed in, thick with unspoken threats, the chapter house a fortress now against the shadows closing tight. The door swung open with a groan of rusted hinges, letting in a gust of night air laced with the metallic bite of impending rain. The investigator stood there, mid-40s, his trench coat rumpled and his badge glinting like a false promise under the porch light. Behind him, a younger partner hovered, notepad in hand, eyes darting across the assembled riders like he was cataloguing threats. The room's warmth clashed with their intrusion, the coffee's steam curling up like wary smoke signals. "Evening," the lead man said, his voice flat as the surrounding plains, laced with the drawl of someone who'd patrolled these backroads too long. "Name's Harlan Reed, State Transport Board. We're following up on an old case. Jack Collins. Heard there might be folks here who remember." His gaze swept the table, lingering on the folder's edge, peeking from Lena's grip, then settling on Vera, who clutched the letter like a talisman. Ben stepped forward, his frame blocking the threshold, the floorboards creaking under his boots. The scent of his leather vest, worn and oiled, filled the space between them, a subtle barrier. "What brings you out this late, Reed? Roads are long, and memories fade." His tone was even, but his eyes held the steel of a man who'd stared down worse than badges. Reed's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Memories, yeah. That's why we're here. Got a tip, someone stirring up dust on a sealed file. Ambush, 20 years back, trucker goes down, cargo vanishes. Official words accident, but whispers say different." He pulled a slim file from his coat, tapping it against his palm, the paper whispering like dry leaves. "Mind if we come in? Chat with the girl who showed at the memorial today." Vera's pulse thrummed in her ears, the letter's ink still damp from her tears. She rose slowly, the chair scraping like a challenge, her green eyes mirroring Jack's defiance. The riders shifted, Riley's hand flexing near his belt, Lena's fingers drumming a silent rhythm on the table. But no one moved to stop her. This was her bridge now, crossing into the storm. "I'm Vera Collins," she said, stepping beside Ben, her voice cutting clear through the tension. "His daughter, and yeah, we've got memories, ones that don't match your file." The words hung, bold and unyielding, the room's shadows deepening as thunder rumbled distant, vibrating the windows. Reed's partner jotted notes, but the older man just nodded, easing past Ben into the frayed heart of the chapter house. The air thickened with the intruder's cologne, cheap and official, clashing against the earthy musk of the space. They settled at the table's edge, the oak groaning in protest, while the iron promise formed a semicircle, a living wall of crossed arms and watchful stares. Mira poured 2 mugs of coffee without asking, sliding them over with a clink that echoed like a gauntlet thrown. "Start with what you know," Reed prompted, sipping the brew with a grimace, his eyes never leaving Vera. "Heard about the vest? Old club custom." Ben sat heavily, the envelope's echo still fresh in his mind. "More than custom. Promise." He glanced at Vera, a nod passing between them like a shared breath. Jack didn't run. He called out a cover-up, hazardous load, wrong roads, a spill that sickened a town. They ambushed to shut him up. He took the hit for me, made me swear to carry his name till she knew. The partner's pen scratched furiously, but Reed leaned back, his chair tilting with a squeak. "Bold claim. Files say he bolted with payroll. Body never recovered. Witnesses? Zilch." His tone probed, testing for cracks, but Vera felt the shift, the way his eyes flicked to the folder, hungry for what it hid. Lena slid the manifests forward, deliberate and slow, the pages fanning out like cards in a high-stakes game. Witnesses vanished. "Sure. But patterns don't. Look, codes for waste, not supplies. Radio log from that night, time-stamped. Jack flagged it. Clark confirmed under duress." Her voice was precise, a blade honed by years of unraveling lies, the lamplight catching the resolve in her dark eyes. Reed scanned the papers, his face unchanging, but Vera caught the subtle tightening of his jaw, the flicker of recognition. Outside, rain began to patter on the tin roof, a soft drumbeat building suspense. It's compelling, but sealed for a reason. Companies long gone, assets folded into bigger fish. Dustville Sheriff's Office? They closed it clean. Clean! Riley growled, his voice a low rumble that shook the air like an idling engine. He leaned in, tattoos shifting like living flames. That clean left a girl thinking her dad was a coward. Poisoned wells, families broken. We got names. Harlan Tate, the trucker who saw it. Lives in Reno now, scared but talking if protected. The partner whispered something to Reed, who waved him off, his coffee forgotten and cooling. Thunder cracked closer, lightning flashing through the grimy panes, illuminating the room in stark whites and blacks. Vera's heart raced, the letter crinkling in her fist. "You knew," she accused softly, locking eyes with Reed. "Or someone like you did, buried it to protect the suits." Reed met her gaze, something cracking in his flinty stare, a weariness perhaps, or the weight of his own buried oaths. "Not me. But I've seen files like this. Corruption's a weed out here, chokes everything." He stood abruptly, the chair toppling with a clatter. "This reopens things. I'll pull strings, but watch your backs. Old players don't like spotlights." As they retreated into the rain-slicked night, engines fading into the storm, the chapter house exhaled. Ben turned to Vera, rain dripping from the eaves like reluctant tears. "That was a start. Reed's no saint, but he's a crack in the wall." The group murmured plans, rides to Reno, calls to old allies, the air buzzing with purpose, the scent of wet earth seeping in. Vera nodded, folding the letter away, Jack's words afire in her chest. The iron promise wasn't just riders, they were the family she'd chosen in this moment, bound by a father's dying vow. But as lightning forked the sky, illuminating distant hills, she wondered if Reed's warning was gift or trap. The road to truth twisted ahead, demanding loyalty's price, one quiet stand at a time. The rain intensified, drumming a relentless rhythm on the roof, washing the gravel lot into muddy rivers that snaked toward the highway. Inside, the riders lingered, voices weaving strategies like threads in a tapestry of justice. Jax, the young mechanic, sketched routes on a napkin, his pencil scratching urgently. Mira stoked the old stove, the flame's warmth pushing back the chill, while Lena pored over maps, her brow furrowed in concentration. Ben pulled Vera aside to a quieter corner, where faded photos lined a shelf, grinning faces from rides long past, Jack among them, arms slung over Ben's shoulder in a moment of easy camaraderie. The image hit her like a gut punch, the joy in his eyes a stark contrast to the ghost she'd mourned. "He'd be proud," Ben murmured, his voice roughened by the storm's roar. "Of you, standing tall like that." She traced the photo's edge, the paper cool under her fingers. "I was angry so long. At him, at Mom, at everything. But this, it changes it all." The admission hung between them, vulnerable in the lamplight, the rain's patter a veil for her softening resolve. Across the room, Riley clapped Jax on the back, the sound muffled by thunder. "We'll ride at dawn. Secure Tate first. Get his statement on tape." The plan solidified, a chorus of agreements rippling out, the group's energy electric, like the storm outside. As the night deepened, Vera stepped onto the porch, rain misting her face, the world alive with scent, ozone and sage, promise and peril. Ben joined her, silent sentinel, the vest's name a beacon in the dark. The Iron Promise's engines would roar again soon, carrying them toward redemption's edge. But in the shadows beyond the fence, unseen eyes might watch, corruption's remnants stirring. Jack's legacy demanded more than words now. It called for unbreaking honor, 1 mile at a time. If this story touched you, hit that like button. It helps spread these tales of quiet courage far and wide. Dawn broke over the chapter house like a reluctant confession. the first rays slicing through the rain-soaked clouds to paint the gravel lot in muted golds. Puddles mirrored the sky, rippling with the drip from eaves, while the air hung heavy with the scent of wet earth and cooling engines. The Iron Promise riders moved with purposeful quiet, loading saddlebags under the floodlight's dying hum. Maps folded crisp, a small recorder tucked into Lena's pack, thermoses of strong coffee passed hand to hand. Vera stood at the edge of the porch, her borrowed jacket zipped tight against the morning chill, watching as Ben checked his Harley's tires, his hands steady, but his jaw set like forged steel. She'd barely slept. Jack's letter folded in her pocket like a talisman, its words replaying in the quiet hours. Be strong. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean, but the tension lingered, coiling in her chest like the low growl of idling bikes. Riley barked soft orders, his voice cutting through the mist, while Mira handed out protein bars wrapped in foil that crinkled like whispers. Jax revved his engine once, the throaty roar echoing off the brick walls, a signal that pulled the group together. 12 riders strong, they formed a convoy, leather creaking, boots scuffing gravel, a rolling testament to loyalty's quiet power. Ben nodded to Vera, offering the passenger seat again. Reno's a 4-hour haul. Tate's expecting us, but eyes open. Reed's tip might have stirred the nest. She climbed on, the bike's warmth seeping through her jeans, the vibrations syncing with her pulse as they pulled out. The highway unfurled ahead, slick with overnight rain, flanked by scrubland awakening in the light, sagebrush beaded with dew, distant mesas rising like ancient guardians. Wind rushed past, carrying the faint brine of evaporating puddles and the sharp tang of exhaust, the convoy's engines harmonizing in a steady cadence that drowned out doubt, miles blurred into rhythm, the white line flashing under tires. Radio chatter crackling faintly about route checks, Vera's thoughts drifting to fragments of Jack, stories Ben had shared in the night, of a man who fixed engines with the same care he gave promises. The desert stretched endless, heat mirages dancing on the horizon, but camaraderie bound them. Lena rode point on her sleek Sportster, glancing back with a thumbs up, while Riley brought up the rear, his bulk a shield against whatever shadows might follow. By mid-morning, Reno's sprawl emerged, neon signs flickering to life amid strip malls and sun-baked lots, the air shifting to urban grit laced with coffee from passing diners. They veered off the main drag into a quieter neighborhood, rows of modest homes with peeling paint and chain-link fences, the scent of fresh-cut grass clashing with distant traffic hum. Harlan Tate's place was unassuming, a single-story bungalow with a faded American flag limp on the porch, flower pots cracked from neglect. Ben killed the engine at the curb, the sudden silence amplifying the tick of cooling metal and Vera's quickened breath. Tate answered the door after one knock, a wiry man in his 60s, his face a map of sun lines and suspicion, eyes squinting against the glare. He wore a threadbare flannel, hands fidgeting with a mug of tea that steamed faintly, the aroma of chamomile wafting out like a fragile peace offering. "Lawson," he rasped, voice gravel from years of dust and silence. "Figured you'd come calling after all this time. Saw the memorial on the news, girl asking questions." His gaze flicked to Vera, softening just a fraction, recognition dawning in the lines around his eyes. They gathered in his dim living room, the air thick with the musty scent of old books and liniment, curtains drawn against prying eyes. A sagging couch groaned under the group's weight, the coffee table cluttered with faded clippings, yellowed articles about the accident. Edges curled like forgotten regrets. Tate sank into an armchair, the springs protesting, and accepted the recorder Lena set before him, its red light blinking like a watchful eye. "All right," he said, exhaling slow. "That night, I was hauling westbound parallel track, saw the lights first, 3 rigs boxing 'em in, no markings. Shots cracked the dark, trucks swerving like drunkards. One went off-road, flipped into the ditch. I pulled over, heart pounding, but they were gone fast, tail lights vanishing into the black. Vera leaned forward, the room's shadows playing across her face, the letter's weight pressing against her thigh. "And my dad? Jack Collins?" Tate nodded, his mug trembling slightly. "Heard him on the CB before it cut, yelling about the cargo, manifest showing poison, not freight. 'Tell someone,' he said, 'for the town.' Then static. I crept up after, found the wreck smoking, glass everywhere. Saw a body slumped. Didn't get close, but it was him. Jacket like yours, Ben. No sign of the attackers, but I caught a plate on one rig. Corporate plates, the kind big haulers use. Reported it anonymous, but next day. Suits at my door, offering hush money. Took it, scared for my family. Been looking over my shoulder since." The words landed heavy, the recorder capturing every pause, every hitch in his breath. Ben's hand rested on Vera's knee, a grounding pressure amid the revelations, the air humming with the low buzz of a ceiling fan, stirring dust motes like ghosts. Lena jotted notes, her pen scratching precise, while Riley stood sentinel by the window, parting the curtain occasionally to scan the street. Empty, but the unease prickled like static before lightning. Tate leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper, the tea forgotten and cooling. "They folded the company into Apex Logistics years back, bigger fish, deeper pockets. But that spill, it hit Dustville hard. Wells tainted, cancers rising quiet. Official reports blamed drought, but I kept copies." He slid a drawer open, revealing a shoebox of documents, photos of the wreck site, blurred but damning, with twisted metal and dark stains suggesting struggle, ledgers with crossed-out entries, signatures that matched the manifests. Vera's fingers brushed the photos, the glossy surface cool, images searing into her mind, the ditch scarred by tires, a vest fragment snagged on brush, echoing the one Ben wore. Tears pricked, but she blinked them back, Jack's strength flowing through her like desert wind. This proves it. He wasn't running. He was fighting. Tate's eyes met hers, weary but kind. "Your pa was a good man, saved more than Ben that night, tried to save a whole town. Use it wise. They buried it once, won't hesitate again." Outside, the sun climbed higher, baking the sidewalk, the neighborhood stirring with distant lawnmowers and children's laughter, a stark counterpoint to the shadows in the room. As they wrapped up, Tate signing a sworn statement with a hand that shook only slightly, Riley's voice cut through from the window. "Company van, 2 blocks out, circling slow." The group moved fast, bikes firing up in a symphony of urgency, the shoebox secured in Lena's bag. Vera mounted behind Ben, the engine's roar drowning her racing thoughts, the convoy peeling away in a cloud of dust that hung like a veil. Reno's streets twisted under them, the van's glint in the rear view, a persistent shadow, engines straining as they pushed toward open road. Corruption's tendrils reached far, but the iron promise rode united, Jack's truth their fuel, unyielding, burning bright against the gathering storm. Ben glanced back once, his voice lost to the wind, but his eyes promising, "We finish this." The highway called, demanding one more stand, loyalty's fire forging the path ahead. The highway twisted like a serpent under the relentless midday sun, heat waves shimmering off the blacktop and turning distant Joshua trees into wavering phantoms. Vera's grip tightened on Ben's waist, the leather of his vest slick with sweat, the embroidered name Jack Collins pressing into her palm like a brand of unyielding truth. The convoy surged ahead, engines snarling in unison, a pack of wolves evading the hunt, tires humming over cracks that jarred her teeth. Behind, the corporate van's white bulk loomed in the rear view, its tinted windows impenetrable, closing the gap with mechanical persistence. The air rushed past, thick with the scent of sun-baked asphalt and the faint, acrid bite of burning rubber from an earlier evasive swerve. Ben leaned into a curve, the Harley banking low, wind tearing at Vera's jacket as if trying to strip away her resolve. "Hold on!" he shouted over the roar, his voice gravelly but steady, the vibration of the bike sinking with the thunder in her chest. Ahead, Lena signaled a split, half the riders veering toward a dusty service road flanked by sheer rock faces, the others, including Riley's thunderous chopper, holding the main line to draw pursuit. The desert blurred into a haze of ochre and sage, the sun's glare forcing squints, but Vera's mind sharpened on the stakes. Tate's box of secrets strapped secure in Lena's saddlebag, a Pandora's trove that could shatter the lies once and for all. Riley's voice crackled over the helmet comms, faint but fierce. "They're splitting. 2 more vans inbound from the east. Apex muscle, no doubt. We shake 'em at the canyon cutoff." The plan was simple, born of years on these unforgiving roads. Use the terrain. The iron promises intimate knowledge of hidden trails etched into the Badlands. Mira's bike growled beside them, her silver hair streaming like a banner, while Jack's weaved through the pack, his younger frame agile, dodging pebbles that kicked up like sparks. They weren't just riding, they were reclaiming momentum, Jack's stand fueling their velocity against the machine of indifference. The canyon loomed sudden and stark, red walls rising like the jaws of some ancient beast, the road narrowing to a single lane choked with boulders and scrub. Ben downshifted, the engine's pitch dropping to a predatory rumble, gravel spitting under the tires as they plunged into the shade. Cool air washed over them, carrying the damp mineral tang of stone and hidden springs, a brief respite from the blaze. The van's horn blared behind, frantic, but the convoy fragmented, bikes darting into side paths, engines echoing off the cliffs like defiant shouts. Vera twisted, catching a glimpse of the white vehicle fishtailing, its brakes squealing as it overshot a turn, dust billowing in a choking cloud. They burst out the other side onto open flats, the group reassembling in a loose formation, breaths ragged but unbroken. Ben eased off the throttle, the Harley settling into a cruise, the wind now a gentle sigh laced with wildflower sweetness from blooming creosote. Vera's heart slowed, adrenaline ebbing into a fierce clarity. "That was too close," she said, her words whipping away, but Ben nodded, his reflection in the mirror showing eyes hardened by the chase. "Apex doesn't chase for nothing. Tate's proof hit a nerve. They know we're closing in." The convoy pushed toward Dustville, the poisoned heart of it all, a faded town huddled in a valley, its main street lined with boarded-up shops and rusted water towers that loomed like skeletal sentinels. By late afternoon, they rolled in under a sky bruised with gathering clouds, the air heavy with the scent of parched soil and faint underlying rot from neglected fields. The Iron Promise parked in the shadow of the old sheriff's office, a squat building of peeling stucco with a flag drooping limp in the still air. Locals glanced from porches, whispers trailing like dust devils, but no one approached, the bikers' presence a known quantity, guardians in leather against the town's quiet decay. Inside the office, the air was stale, thick with the musty odor of old files and stale coffee brewing in a corner pot. Captain Elias Grant, retired but lingering like a ghost in his corner desk, looked up from a stack of yellowed reports, his face a weathered map of regrets. Deep lines from squinting at horizons, eyes dulled by decades of looking the other way. He was pushing 70, slight in a faded uniform shirt, but his handshake with Ben was firm, calloused from years gripping a wheel rather than a gavel. "Lawson, heard you stirred the pot. Girls here too?" His gaze shifted to Vera, softening with a flicker of something like paternal sorrow, the room's single fan whirring overhead like a hesitant confession. They gathered around his desk, the wood scarred and ink-stained. Lena unpacking Tate's box with deliberate care, the photos, ledgers, statements fanned out like evidence in a courtroom of conscience. Riley stood by the door, arms crossed, a silent bulwark, while Mira and Jax flanked the windows, eyes scanning the empty street where shadows lengthened. Grant adjusted his glasses, the lenses catching the late light filtering through dusty blinds, and pored over the pages, his breath hitching at the radio log. I signed off on the closure. Pressure from above. State board. Apex reps breathing down my neck. Said it was clean or heads roll, but I knew that spill. Wells went bad overnight. Buried the tests, called it natural. Jack's call came through my dispatch, clear as day, warning about the cargo. Then nothing. Vera leaned in, the scent of aged paper mingling with Grant's aftershave, sharp and citrusy. You let them paint him a deserter, my whole life. Her voice trailed, not in anger but in the raw ache of stolen dignity, Jack's letter burning in her pocket like a coal. Grant's shoulders sagged, the chair creaking as he rubbed his temples, the fan's blades slicing the air in rhythmic slices. Shame's a heavy load, miss. I was young, ambitious, thought it'd pass, but it ate at me, kept this. He pulled a drawer, revealing a sealed envelope, its flap brittle with time. Jack's final report, unfiled, timestamp matches, proves he radioed the hazard, demanded backup. They jammed it after, but I held the original log. Ben's hand found Vera's shoulder, a steady anchor amid the revelations, the room's tension coiling like the spring in the old clock on the wall. Lena snapped photos with a small camera, the shutter clicking soft and insistent, while Riley's low murmur confirmed, "Street's clear, but that van's been spotted circling the outskirts." Grant nodded, signing an affidavit with a pen that scratched like truth clawing free, his signature looping bold despite the tremor in his hand. "Take it to the board. Reed's you're in. He's clean, owes me from the academy, but Apex, they'll fight dirty. Suits with lawyers, not guns, but it cuts deeper." As they filed out, the sun dipping low to cast the town in amber glows, Vera paused at the door, turning back. Why now? After all this time? Grant met her eyes, the weight of unspoken oaths lifting slightly. "Because promises outlast badges. Your dad deserved better. We all do." The convoy reformed under twilight's hush, engines purring to life, the air cooling to carry hints of rain-scented dust. Vera climbed on behind Ben, the Harley's warmth a familiar embrace, the sheriff's envelope secure with the rest. They rode out as stars pricked the indigo sky, Dustville shrinking in the mirrors, a town redeemed in small measure by one man's late confession. But the van's distant headlights flickered again, persistent as corruption's shadow, hinting at the final push. Jack's legacy wasn't buried anymore. It roared with them, demanding a reckoning where honor met the machine head-on, loyalty's quiet fire illuminating the road to closure. The twilight deepened into a velvet shroud as the convoy thundered toward the state board offices in Eldridge, a nondescript city clinging to the edge of the Badlands like a forgotten outpost. Vera's arms ached from the hours of riding, but she held fast to Ben, the Harley's frame a steady pulse beneath them, chrome flashing under passing street lamps that flickered like hesitant stars. The air had cooled to a crisp bite, laced with the urban tang of exhaust and distant rain. The pursuing van's headlights, now a faint smear in the mirrors, outmaneuvered at last by the canyon's twists and the iron promise's unerring grit. Lena led the pack, her saddlebag bulging with the weight of truths. Tate's shoebox, Grant's affidavit, the manifest that peeled back layers of deceit like sunburnt skin. Eldridge unfolded in sodium glows, low-slung buildings with neon signs buzzing faintly, parking lots empty, save for the convoy's growl as they pulled into the board's shadowed lot. The office loomed, a glass-fronted monolith reflecting the night sky, its lobby light spilling out like an invitation laced with caution. Reed waited at the curb, trenchcoat slung over his arm, cigarette glowing cherry red as he exhaled a plume that twisted in the breeze. His partner's car idled nearby, but the younger man's face was absent, replaced by a terse nod from Reed, eyes shadowed under the brim of his hat. "Lawson," Reed greeted, voice low as the group dismounted, boots crunching on loose gravel that whispered underfoot. The scent of cooling engines mingled with his tobacco smoke, a gritty perfume for the reckoning ahead. "You made good time. Evidence?" Ben handed over the bundle without a word, the papers rustling like dry leaves in autumn wind. Vera stepped forward, her borrowed jacket zipped against the chill, Jack's letter a folded weight in her pocket, its edges worn from endless touches. Inside, the lobby's fluorescent hum greeted them like a sterile heartbeat, linoleum floors echoing their steps as Reed led them to a back conference room. The air was cool and conditioned, smelling of printer ink and stale donuts from a side table, a far cry from the chapter house's earthy warmth. A handful of board officials waited, suits with clipped hair and notepads, faces impassive as stone. But Reed's presence shifted the dynamic, his badge a quiet authority cutting through the bureaucracy. The iron promise filled the doorway, a wall of leather and resolve. Riley's bulk, Lena's sharp gaze, Mira's steady hand on Jax's shoulder. They weren't intruders, they were the conscience the room had long ignored. Vera took a seat at the polished table, the wood smooth under her palms, contrasting the calluses she'd earned gripping Ben's bike. "This is about my father," she began, her voice clear, slicing the room's murmur like a knife through fog. "Jack Collins. 20 years ago, he died exposing a cover-up. Hazardous cargo dumped to Poison Dustville, lives ruined for profit. Official reports called him a deserter, but here's the truth." Lena spread the documents, the photos, stark images drawing gasps, the wreck's twisted frame, bloodied vest scrap, well tests yellowed but damning, showing toxins that matched the manifests. One official, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes like tempered glass, leaned in, the chair's wheels squeaking softly. "These are compelling, but sealed files require—" Reed cut her off, sliding Grant's affidavit across, the ink bold and fresh. Captain Grant's signature, he buried it under pressure from Apex. Tate's statement too, eyewitness to the ambush. Radio logs prove Jack flagged the hazard before they silenced him. The room thickened with tension, the clock on the wall ticking like a fuse, papers shuffling as hands reached, eyes widening at the patterns. Corporate plates, vanished witnesses, the spill's quiet toll on a town left to wither. Ben stood at Vera's side, his shadow long across the table, the vest's name catching the light, a red thread weaving through the decades. "He made a promise," he said, voice gravel rough but unbreaking. "To fight for what's right, we carried it. Now you do your part. Unseal it, clear his name. Give his daughter the dignity stolen by lies." The words landed heavy, the air humming with the weight of oaths long deferred, the officials exchanging glances that cracked their facades, guilt flickering like shadows at dawn. The silver-haired woman cleared her throat, the sound amplified in the hush. "We'll convene immediately. If this holds, and it appears to, Apex faces audits, reparations for Dustville, Collins' record. It'll be amended. Hero, not fugitive." Murmurs rippled, nods passing like reluctant waves, but Vera felt the shift. Justice, uncoiling, slow but inexorable, the machine bending under truth's quiet pressure. Hours blurred in the room's confines, questions probing like spotlights, the convoy waiting outside with engines off but ready, the night's chill seeping through vents. Finally, as pre-dawn light grayed the windows, Reed emerged with a sealed packet, amended reports, Jack's heroism etched in official black and white, a commendation for valor that would reach Vera's mother, rewrite the stories poisoning her youth. "It's done," Reed said, handing it to Ben, his face etched with a weariness lifted slightly. "Apex lawyers will squirm, but the board's moving. Town gets clean water funds. Your man's legacy. It's free. Vera took the packet, fingers tracing the seal, tears hot on her cheeks, but her chin lifted high. The lobby doors swung open to the awakening world, the convoy stirring as engines coughed to life, a symphony of low rumbles greeting the rose-tinged horizon. She climbed behind Ben one last time, the Harley purring beneath her, the wind rising cool and promising as they rolled out, Dustville bound, to lay the truth at the memorial's feet. The crosses stood sentinel in the morning light, dew-kissed and gleaming, the sagebrush whispering approval as the group arrived. Vera knelt at the spot where it began, placing the packet beside Jack's faded photo, the papers a bridge from grave to grace. Her mother waited there, summoned by Ben's call, eyes wide, arms opening as sobs broke free, the whole of years mending in shared tears. The iron promise encircled them, silent guardians, their patches a tapestry of chosen kin. Ben knelt beside Vera, his hand on her shoulder, the vest's name now a shared emblem. "He kept his promise," he murmured. The desert air alive with wildflower scent and the faint hum of distant traffic. "So did we." She nodded, the weight lifting like mist under sun, Jack's firecracker spirit burning bright in her chest, redeemed, unbroken. As the sun climbed, painting the highway in gold, the convoy formed up for the ride home, engines roaring a final vow, loyalty's legacy etched in miles and honor, enduring against all shadows. The road stretched endless, but now it led to light, quiet courage victorious, a father's stand echoing forever in the hearts it saved. Thank you for riding this journey with us. If these stories of unbreakable promises and chosen family resonate, subscribe for more tales of quiet heroism that light the way.